In this video, I'll be explaining the front-end part of the application. So if you haven't watched the previous video on contact bot application, I do encourage you, please go and watch that. That video will explain you how you can download the project and how you can run the project. So hey guys, this is Vishwajit. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. So let's get started. So I will show you the repo. This is the repo and I have downloaded it. The application is working. So first I will run the Flask server. So python main.py and the server started. So these are the few of the entries that I created. Okay. So if you are running the application for the first time, you will see a pretty clean board as you can see it now. Okay. So it is asking to create contact, and I have gone to the front end part in my first video, so I'll be explaining the code part. So I will go in a very high level view what the code is doing, and I have provided comments that should help you out. There is this table heading section. Okay. So if I create a contact, this creates first name, last name, email, and action. So this particular entries, I should say this particular values, first name, last name, are coming from here. So I also have the user count. So this particular count you see, this is coming from the user count. This is the status bar. The status bar tells you the status. Like if you add a user, it tells user is added. If you relate a user, it tells user is related. So you can see here it is saying enter user details. If there are nothing, so it will say no user detail is present. So based upon this number of users present, it is just doing a check. So this is the status bar, and this is responsible for showing that text of status. And this particular event listener. So I'm using the DOM content loaded, and so the DOM content loaded, what it will do is if the website is completely loaded, so it is going to invoke this function. So this function is responsible for all the loading of the particular status and this contact bot application and this particular button. So as soon as the HTML is completely loaded, it will invoke this function. So if I go down, so load main page, this is the main point of the invocation. Okay. So if you see this bar, let me also show you the HTML. So in the HTML, if you look carefully, so this is the place where I am adding the CSS style. This syntax is for Jinja since I'm using a Flask server. And if you see this particular script, this is used to point to the JavaScript file, and this syntax is for the Jinja, so that Flask is able to render it. And if you see, I only have one div section over here, I should say one div over here, and it has a class of main container, and I am just using this class to add or delete information within this particular div. So the main page, what it does, it selects the main container and it creates and deletes element based upon our interaction with the interface. So I am not going to go in depth over here. So if you see in a very high level view, so there is a function called as create main table, and this function is used to get the user details. So I'm just invoking this API, and there is this Flask server. So that Flask server is returning all the users present. So this is fetching the user details, and based upon that, if you see, I'm doing this setting the status. So if there are no users, I'm saying no user is present and setting the particular status. And if there are more than like if there are some users, I am doing a sort of computation. Okay. And I am saying, okay, displaying all the users. So I am just creating the table, and I am just displaying all the details. Okay, so if you see this user count, so what I am exactly doing is I am setting the number of users. So that's the computation it is doing. So it's just calculating the value of the last user. So for example, if there are 10 users, okay, and the last value is 10, let's suppose this is 1 over here, the last value is 10, so I am assigning 10 over here. The user count is 10. So that's all I am doing in this section. And there is also a table body. Okay, so if there are certain entries, let me give an entry. So you can see it created 10 and first name, last name, and email. Now you might say why it is not 1, it is supposed to be 1, why it is 10. I will be explaining this in depth in the backend section. So this data is coming from the backend. Okay, so this is the number of this is the number that is auto incremented in the database. So every time I keep on adding users, okay, I will keep on adding users and I will delete them. There is an auto increment value. I can show you that, but this will be I'll be talking about this more depth in the backend section. So if you see, this is the database part. Okay, if you see, number of users is showing as 10. So this is an auto incremented value. So the more number of users you keep on adding, this number will increase. But if you delete the number of users, this won't decrease. Okay, it just auto increments. So that is something you should remember. And I have explained it clearly in the backend part. So here in the table, I have two buttons. I have this delete button and I have the update button. Okay, so this particular piece of code adds functionality to the delete button and update button, and apart from that, any error I am just showing to the user that there is an error. And I have tried to make sure that the errors that you see in the front end are not much technical. I have made sure that all the errors that you see are very general, very generic, and anyone can understand. The person doesn't need to be a technical person to understand the error, and I think we should handle errors in that way. And this piece of code, what it is doing, it's just adding those elements. So for example, so here we have the app name div. So this is this particular contact board application. Then we have the status bar div that we have over here. So here I'm just adding my divisions into the main container. That's it. So this is the main function that starts the execution. And if I go a little bit up, this is create contact function. If you go into depth, so this just creates creates the user. Okay, and it also checks for user validation. So by user validation, I mean if you want to create a contact, if you have not provided first name, last name, and email, if you try to submit it, it will tell you enter first name. If you add first name, okay, let's suppose I added Sean and try to submit, it will tell enter last name. And if I add Joe, it will try to say please enter email. Now if I add something over here, I try to submit, it will say please enter a valid email. So all these checks are performed. And now if I submit, okay, I think email.com. Now if I submit, now it will say it's created. So all these checks and adding the user is handled by this function. Okay, so that's this function does. And after that, we have the cancel submission. Cancel submission, as you can see, it is anytime you want to cancel your submission, you can just do it. If you want to update, we also have this cancel button. So if you press the cancel button, it just cancels it. So just a little piece of code which just adds more behavior to the UI. So that's what the cancel button does. So here you can see there is a function called as submit user details. So this is kind of a another sub function, I should say. So as I showed in the previous section, so this particular function is a sub function of the create contact function. So since create contact function was becoming a little bit heavier, so I just separated that logic out into separate functions. So if you see over here, so this has all this check whether the first name is present, the last name is present, email is present, and if it is present, it's valid or not. So we are like I am checking all of that. So and also I am submitting the request into the backend part, and that's all I'm doing. So if I'm trying to create or I'm trying to update, so both of the conditions are handled over here. So that's all. So if I try to update and I don't provide this value and try to submit it, it will say enter first name. So does not matter you are adding, creating a new contact or updating it. This you have to fill the first name, last name, okay? And you don't have to fill the email in case of updating because that will be set by default. So email is the primary key over here. And that's all this does. This just takes care of all the user input to submit to the backend. So the first name, last name, and email. So that's what this particular function does. Apart from that, I have another function for updating user details. Okay, so this is just used to update the user details. Okay, it's same as creating, only in case of update user details, we have to only update the first name and the last name based upon a key. So that's what it does. And update user details also uses submit user data, which is this function. Okay, so this function, the submit user data, is used by the create contact function and our update user function. Okay, and we have the delete user data function. So that is just used to delete the data. If I just click on delete, it will get deleted, right? And then we have a function which is the fetch call. So here I'm just doing a fetch call, that's it. So I'm just handling the promises. I'm just requesting, I am passing the URL, okay, and I am passing the request body, and I'm just getting the promise back. And if there is any error, it is throwing that error, and if there is no error, I am just returning the response back. So since this function is being called multiple times, I thought of creating a separate function and just keep on invoking it. So helps to reduce lines of code and duplicate codes. So just following the dry principle as much as I can. And we have this create main table. So this just creates an empty table. So this does not create any data. It creates just empty table. And then we have various helper functions over here. So this is users inside table row. I believe you can just use the particular comment to go through it. So you can, so these are like small components that I'm using to build it. So let me take a screenshot and explain you. That will be good. If I use a snipping tool, yeah, this will help to explain. So what I am doing is, I need a red pen. Yeah. So what I am doing is, I am creating this separately. I am creating this separately. Okay. And I am also creating this one. I don't know why it happened like that, but I'm not so good with these drawings. I'm creating this separately. Why it is bending it like this? And also I'm creating this one separately. Okay. So this, even this one also I'm creating it separately. Okay. So you can see I have a separate code to create this particular division. Okay. And also I have a separate code to create this update and delete button. Okay. All are modular. Mainly what I'm trying to say is all are kind of modular, and you can use them as you like. So for example, here if I go, so create user input row function. So this will create the user input row. So what I mean by user input row, so when you create contact, if you it will show you this particular entry rows, input rows I should say. So you have entries over here, you can pass the email, and if you see now the options are submit and cancel. Okay, when you already have an entry, the option will be update and delete. So I have a logic to handle that. So I have another function to create text box inside table row. Okay, so that handles it. That just creates the text boxes, only this text box part. Okay, as I said. So that's what it does. I have another helper function to validate email, and we have user input heading. As I showed, it creates the table heading and setting the status messages. Okay, this functions handles button creation. Okay, so when I want to create update and delete button, when I want to create submit and cancel button, this set of function does that. Completely modular. Okay, few lines of code and it is doing that. And I have one helper function. This function is used to create classes. That's it. So I am just using these values to create classes. That's what I'm doing actually. So I have these functions. These are completely modular. Okay, experiment with them as you like and change based upon your need. So you can like add instead of email, you can add a phone number over here. Okay, and then you can have the action. So just like change as you like. So I think that covers most of the front end part. And in the next video I'll be covering the backend part. I have already recorded the backend part and it will be available soon. So that's all for this video. If you liked this video, so do press the like button, and thank you for watching. I'll see you in an awesome upcoming programming video.